I see a lot of new faces. Make sure if you're new and just your first time, get your name on the email list, the yellow sheet back here, so we can get you some information about our group. And anyway, you never know, you might want to join. So anyway, again, thanks for coming, and also thanks to all those watching online. Before I forget, those watching online, if you have a question, put your question in the chat box. And what else was I supposed to say about those? Make sure they're muted. Make sure you're muted. Okay, thanks, John. Okay, I have a few announcements, and then we'll get to our guest speaker, Dennis Pricola. I would like to thank all those who brought snacks tonight. It's appreciated. And I'm sure you've noticed the artwork around the room tonight. Uh, Join us here tomorrow night here at the museum, April 4th, for the first Friday Art Walk, featuring Pueblo newcomer and recent Pause member Bradley Bowman. He's a lifetime creator. Bradley has explored music, archaeology, and fine art with a deep passion for nature and wild places. His acrylic paintings serve a visual journal, capturing his experiences and emotion. Again, that's tomorrow night here in this room from 5 to 8. This coming Sunday, we'll be taking a field trip to the Kramer and Canterbury Episcopal sites south of Fowler. I have 2 spots left. If you're interested, let me know tonight, and we'll get you on that list. Monday, April 21st, is our book discussion group. And our book that we're discussing, which ties into tonight's talk, is Cleopatra, A Life by Stacy Schiff. Yeah, it's really a good book. Our speaker tonight will be joining our book discussion group, April 21st. And anyway, get the book. There's still plenty of time. Get it, read it, and join our book discussion group. Again, April, and it's a Zoom meeting. So don't have to worry about going anywhere. You can join us in your jammies and drink a beer. May 3rd, Pause will be having a special program in honor of Archaeological and Historical Preservation Month. And we're going to welcome Dr. William T. Taylor from the Museum of Natural History in Denver, who is an archaeologist, scientist, and author. Dr. Taylor will be talking about rethinking the origins of the horse, of horse domestication and its impact on the ancient world. Dr. Taylor is the author of Hoofbeats, How Horses Shaped Human History. Dr. Taylor is an assistant professor and curator of archaeology at the University of Colorado Boulder. His work explores the domestication of the horse and the ancient relationships between people and animals through archaeozoology and archaeological science. Now, remember this, the date, time, and venue have been changed for this. It won't be here at the Heritage Museum. The date is Saturday, May 3rd. Mark your calendar. The time will be 5 o'clock, and the venue is the Hogue Auditorium on the PCC campus. So again, check your midden and your emails. I think we'll send out reminders and everything, but it is a change of venue and a different day. Is there any other announcements tonight? Does anybody have anything else that I might be missing or they want to announce? If not, I'd like to introduce our guest speaker, Dennis Pricola. He is a retired Navy cryptological captain whose 30-year career allowed him to travel widely across the world. A lifelong fascination with the ancient world led Dennis to visit ancient sites wherever he traveled. He participated in archaeological surveys overseas and joined the Egyptian Studies Society with alacrity when he retired from the Navy in the Denver area. Dennis is also past president of the Egyptian Studies Society. Dennis has a bachelor's degree in history from the U.S. Naval Academy at Annapolis, a master's degree in strategic planning from the Naval War College in Newport, Rhode Island, and a master's in liberal arts with a concentration in history from Harvard University. Please welcome Dennis Pricola.
Doug, thank you for the kind words and introduction, and thank you for inviting me for the Pueblo Archaeology and Historical Society. I am very impressed with the turnout. I hope my presentation can live up to your expectations. This is a excellent group. Thank you. Um, let's talk about Cleopatra. Fascinating topic, fascinating person, and her enduring impact on our culture, which we're going to talk about. We'll talk about her family, her history, current archaeological efforts to find her and Mark Antony's tomb, what happened to her family after she died, which is a very little known topic, hard to find sometimes, and a lot of uniqueness and why she was a very special person and why we're still talking about her 2055 years after she has passed away. On our picture here, that is Cleopatra at her death scene after she's committed suicide, probably by my opinion, and there's a lot of interesting contradictions in the historical records that have survived, probably by the bite of a poisonous asp. Why is it going forward? And those are her two handmaidens, Charmian and Iris, probably the most famous servants in history. I've actually read two novels that had Charmian as the main character. And who was Cleopatra? Okay, 2,000 years ago. Probably the most famous person, most famous woman from classical antiquity, and one of the most famous personalities in all of human history. Raise your hand in here if you have not heard of Cleopatra before. I did an experiment at work. I went around asking people, I probably asked 20, 30 people. Everybody had heard of Cleopatra. I then asked them a second question. What do you know about her? Some got it right on. Some a little okay. Some were a little off base. But everybody had heard of Cleopatra. Everybody. Now, could you go somewhere and find somebody in modern culture that doesn't go any further back than Taylor Swift? Sure. But most people in the modern world have heard of Cleopatra. She was Cleopatra the Seventh. It was actually a common name royalty in the Macedonian um, nobility, the royal family. And in fact, Alexander the Great had a sister named Cleopatra. There were Cleopatras in most of the ruling families in his successor kingdoms. Images of her. Okay. Statue of her. This is on a temple side. This is Cleopatra and her son Caesarion, as shown as rulers in Egypt on a temple in Dendera, Egypt. Coins and two statues, a bust that have been identified as her. What did she look like? What made her so impressive to everybody in antiquity? Well, we don't know for sure. We have those images, but we have contradictory statements in the historical records. Plutarch, she was okay, but it was her voice, her wit, her intelligence. She charmed people. Everybody. She's one of those people that lit up the room. Cicero, the famous Roman writer, statesman, politician. Of course, when she got to Rome, everybody in the nobility had to go up and meet her. It was like meeting the Queen of England when she came to the United States. Everybody wanted an invitation. So even Cicero went up and see her, even though he was a political enemy. And he was charmed by her, and he wrote about it. As it says here, she was bewitching. It was pleasant merely to hear the sound of her voice, like an instrument of many strings. She spoke 9 languages fluently, including Greek, which is probably her native language, Latin, Egyptian. She was the first ruler of Egypt in the Macedonian Ptolemaic dynasty for 280 years to be able to speak the native language in Egypt, and Aramaic and other languages, mostly in Africa. Dio says she was a woman of surpassing beauty. So what do we believe? Well, we can only look at the images and figure out, well, if that was painted, how would it look? How beautiful would she be? Notice that archaeologists like to call that a melon bun in the back of her head. If somebody wore that today, you might say, that's not really gorgeous, but this is what women wore of the nobility of that era, the late Roman Republic and in the Greek kingdoms. So she was very stylish. And notice the headband, that is called a diadem. That is, they didn't wear crowns in this day. They wore diadems. It was just this cloth strip across the head. You didn't wear that if you were not a king's queen. That was for the ruler only. Oh, and she was the richest woman in the world. That would certainly make you pretty attractive, wouldn't it? This is one of the books on Cleopatra, Llewellyn Jones. He wrote a book called Cleopatra's, and he went through all the Cleopatras. As I said, she was the seventh in the Ptolemaic family. And as he says, they were a ferocious bunch. You really didn't want to sit down to a family meal with them in case you ended up as dessert. A caution in this lecture. By modern terms, Cleopatra was not necessarily a nice person. We're not going to talk about a lot of nice people. This was a very bloody era if you were a ruler. This was a very bloody era. There are a couple of nice people I will identify as we go along because they're standout for that period. How do we know about her? Well, we know about her because ancients wrote, Virgil, Josephus, Plutarch, I mentioned Cassius Dio. Caesar, who had a child by her, hardly mentions her in his book about his war in Egypt. But William Shakespeare translated a bunch of that into his plays. Interestingly, I remember reading Julius Caesar with my 8th grade class. And as Mr. Potter, our instructor, said, he left Cleopatra out. He's not mentioned. But the follow-on play, Antony and Cleopatra, is all about him. I just finished watching the Charlton Heston version of that yesterday. Oh, by the way, of all the cultural depictions, I would say none of them have it exactly right. Everybody's writing from a point of view, has something to say about you bringing in their modern interpretations to bear on her morality, her beauty, or whatever. And we'll talk about those as we go through. But I think you guys chose a good book for the book club stuff. The Stacy Schiff book, I think, is probably the best. And she points out when the ancient sources have contradictions. My favorite, the Elizabeth Taylor 1963 movie. That's, to me, that's Cleopatra. Okay. Supposed to be 2 movies, Julius Caesar and Cleopatra, Mark Antony and Cleopatra, but during the filming, a tempestuous love affair started between the 2 married stars, Elizabeth Taylor and Richard Burton. They were married to other people. They started an affair, hit all the headlines, and the studio said, we got to capitalize on this publicity and mushed them together into one movie. Elizabeth Taylor at the premiere was so upset at the result, which I think is a great movie, but I don't know what they saw. She was so upset, she went into the ladies' room and threw. Oh, by the way, the best scene in the movie, in my opinion, the triumphal entrance into Rome. That is just a fantastic scene. There's horsemen, there's soldiers, there's dancing ladies, there's doves being released from a pyramid. There's Cleopatra and her son riding there on top of a platform in front of the Sphinx going into the city. That never happened. Why? Because 500 years earlier, when Rome got rid of the last king, they made it illegal for any ruling sovereign to come within the city limits. And they're punishable by death. So she didn't enter the city. She did go to Rome with her son to meet the son's father, Julius Caesar, for the first time, and also do a lot of politicking. But she stayed outside at Caesar's Villa, just outside the city on the Janiculum Hill, which is that hill overlooking the Vatican, if you know Rome. And that's where she received visitors, spent the nights with Caesar before he went back to his wife, etc. But it was there was a parade much like this later on in her life, and we'll talk about that. It happened in Egypt. Let's talk about cultural depictions of her. She has been in the movie since the movie started. 1912. I watched this one. It's a silent. It doesn't follow history very well. And it kind of has the cinematic qualities of a neighborhood group getting together, getting some costumes, and shooting it in their backyard. But it's interesting. Helen Gardner was a famous star of that period, and it's an early depiction. The 1917 movie with Theda Bara set Hollywood on fire. That recent book, I think it's only 3 years old, Lost Cleopatra by Philip Dye. I've been meaning to get that. I just ordered it yesterday, and I haven't read it, but it was a very famous movie. So how famous? It was declared obscene by the Hays Commission in the 1930s, locked away. And oh, by the way, you can't watch it because the last 2 copies were in university libraries and they burned up in fires. I did find a 5-minute voice cut of Theda Bara on online, and she sounds like a very well-educated upper class woman. The movie, you can see the costumes scandalized everybody. Claudette Colbert did a great job in the 1930s. It was wonderful, and it had a lot of historical. If you took all the movies ever made of Cleopatra, cut out bits and pieces of them, you could put one historically accurate thing together. Any one individual, you can't do that. This one had some great scenes in it that were very accurate. Some of the costuming was great. Vivian Leigh, same thing. Sophia Loren, I haven't seen this one actually. 2 Nights with Cleopatra. Anybody here seen it? Is it good? No, okay. And then Antony and Cleopatra movies have been made all the way through history as well. As I said, I just saw the Charlton Heston one. It's okay. A period at the end where they've been defeated and they're waiting for the end to come. It's a very dark period, and Antony is very morose. Charlton Heston managed to smile his way through the whole period. He read the script to the director. I like this one, Asterisk and Obelisk. They're comic strip characters popular in Europe. They're 2 Gauls that are always getting the best of Julius Caesar. And in one, they have a mission to help Cleopatra. And Monica Bellucci plays her. And there's a scene where they're, you want? And there's a scene of her there in a milk bath. According to the history books I've not read, I don't recall anything about a milk. Stacy Schiff version of the book was going to be turned into movies in 2013. It got canceled. Angelina Jolie, who played Olympias in the Alexander the Great movie, Alexander's mother, was going to play Cleopatra. That fell apart. And then in 2021, it got brought back again, and now it's canceled again. There was rumors on the internet that Lady Gaga in the lower left was going to play Cleopatra. And now I just wanted to point this one out. I saw this actress in the very recent movie, Ministry of Ungentlemanly Warfare, about commandos in World War II. A lady's going to a costume party. She's a spy, and she's dressed as Cleopatra. And the outfit she's holding is a Julius Caesar uniform, armor to get him to dress up. Her date. Um, Two new movies on the way, in development. Hopefully, they will come to fruition with competing producers, directors, and stars. Gal Gadot and Zendaya. And on the upper left there, you can see the more recent one that caused a heck of a hullabaloo online by Jada Pinkett Smith, Will Smith's, the actor Will Smith's wife. Why did it cause it? Because it depicted Cleopatra, her family, and most of the palace staff as Black. And we can talk about her ethnicity. It is slightly open to debate. It is assumed who her mother was, the queen. Oh, by the way, the Ptolemies practiced brother and sister marriage. That was passed down from the founder of the dynasty. He wanted to keep the bloodline pure. So they should have been pure blood Macedonian. However, none of the historical sources actually say who her mother is. They don't name the queen. So everybody assumes it was the queen. Got skipped over for whatever reason. But let's say 99% chance she was pure-blooded Macedonian. 1% chance you can insert whoever you want there. Another handmaiden, a skull remade, whatever. But there were people born on the wrong side of the blanket, as they put it nicely. It's possible that she was not full-blooded Macedonian, which is Northern Greek. Those people are Alexander the Great from Macedon was blonde. Okay. Today, still, that area is populated by a lot of blondes and light-haired people, light and fair skin. So that's why it caused a big hole. Well, let's talk about our worldwide impact today still. I ran into this cafe in Aomori in 1984 in northern Japan at the very tip of Honshu, the main island. That's how deep she has penetrated the world. Look at the menu there. It's just coffee, drinks, sandwiches, and pastries, like typical Japanese coffee shop. But they appropriated Cleopatra because that's a name. That is somebody to attract people. Attracted me. They get people in the door. Cleopatra in the middle of what the Japanese consider the boonies. Denver, you can go get a tattoo from Cleopatra Inc. And in fact, it's a worldwide chain. There's the one in Amman, Jordan. There's also Cleopatra's Bar and Grill in Lakewood outside Denver. Don't go there. It's a dive bar. And Cleopatra's Grill and Hummus, one of my friends in the Egyptian Studies Society, ate there recently, took guests there and said, don't do it. This is a $20 hotel in Luxor, Egypt, just outside the Valley of the Kings. However, it has excellent reviews online. Rome has a very garish hotel. And you can find everything in Los Angeles: beauty salons, nail salons, tattoo parlors, medical aesthetics, whatever that is. And you can even go to Kazakhstan and find them. She's all over the world. And this is just a sampling. You could find them in Nairobi, you could find them in Buenos Aires, all over the world. There are Cleopatra joints. Moscow. There's a strip joint in Montreal and a bistro in Haiphong in Vietnam. Everybody can get costumes for this Halloween. You can be sedate Cleopatra, young Cleopatra, sexy Cleopatra. Everybody slaps Cleopatra onto their products. It's their Art Deco period. She was everywhere. Cans of vegetables, coffee, beer, books, toys, games, Legos, businesses. I ran into her 3 weeks ago at Disney World. It's a small world after all. She's the stand-in for Egypt. And that little toy there on the side, they no longer sell it in the gift shop. So you can go on eBay. I found it on eBay for $99.95. Found this online, a little meme that said, most of us have 32 great, great, great grandparents. Cleopatra had two. I had to check it out, got the family tree out. Yep, that's correct. She's descended from two. Again, Ptolemy's directed. Ptolemy the first is up there. He directed sons and daughters marry each other, keep that bloodline pure. She was the product of generations of incest, which, oh, by the way, Julius Caesar mentions in the movie Cleopatra to Liz Taylor. You're the product of lots of incest. But again, she's brilliant. She's stunningly, potentially beautiful. And she had a tremendous facility with languages. It didn't seem to stunt her, I guess, is the point. Notice the kids down there. We'll talk about them through Julius Caesar. She had Ptolemy the 15th, who normally goes by the name Caesarion. And with Mark Antony, she had 3 children, twins, Alexander Helios and Cleopatra Selene, and Ptolemy Philadelphus. We will talk about those later. Her father was Ptolemy the 12th Auletes, flute player. I won't try to pronounce his Egyptian title. He was actually toppled by his nobles at one point, and he left. His daughter was put in charge, his oldest daughter, going back to the family tree, Berenice or Berenike, as they would have pronounced it, the 4th there. Right here. She ran the place. Arsinoe the 4th was younger. Ptolemy the 13th was younger. Ptolemy the 14th was younger. Cleopatra the 7th was the second child. So Berenike the 4th took the throne, ran Egypt. And when Ptolemy the 12th came back, he had her executed. His daughter. But she had been ruling against him, ruling in his place. What did he do while he was in Rome? He paid massive bribes. Massive bribes. Romans, please put me back on the throne of Egypt. I want to go back. He got Julius Caesar's support. He paid probably over a year's income of the whole state of Egypt to him to make that happen. He toppled. Again, Berenike took over. He went to Athens first, then Rome. Did he go with Cleopatra? We don't know. It's not in the sources. It's suspected that she would have gone. To stay in Alexandria with Berenike could have been dangerous. He had also paid 10,000 talents. That's hundreds of millions of dollars in today's money. To the Roman governor of Syria, Gabinius. And Gabinius took his army down from Syria and put Ptolemy the 12th back in the throne. And at dinners there, who did he meet? The daughter, Cleopatra, who was maybe 14, just at the right age to start falling in love to dashing officers in uniform. Because this Mark Antony was young, he was brawny, he was dashing, he was brave, he was dumber than a rock. But she learned her lesson. Egyptians, rulers rule at the sufferance of Rome. Later on, she's ruling in combination with her husband / brother, the younger Ptolemy the 13th. And they, like the Ptolemies do, go to civil war. She raises an army. He gets the regular Egyptian army, and they go to fight it out. Julius Caesar, having just won his civil war against the senatorial faction, John, is there a way to get rid of that banner at the top?
Click the OK.
I did earlier and it just advanced.
Okay.
Oh, it worked now. Sorry. Thank you. And so Julius Caesar goes down chasing his enemy Pompey, who was executed by Ptolemy the 13th. And it decides he's going to set things right in Egypt. Got to set it straight. Oh, by the way, they owe me lots of money. And he meets Cleopatra, famously brought to him, smuggled into the palace, rolled in a carpet or a laundry bag. And they start an affair almost immediately. She's 21 years old now, tempestuous. They fight a war against their brother. And oh, by the way, their younger sister, Arsinoe the Fourth, who escapes from the palace also. Ptolemy the 13th is let go from the palace by Caesar, protesting, eternal loyalty, oh great Caesar. As soon as he gets outside the city walls, he takes command of the army, fighting against Caesar. As does Arsinoe. She's all of 14 years old, a stripling of a young girl. And she decides she wants to command the army, so she has the general, very experienced general, Achillas, executed. They lose the war, no big surprise. Ptolemy the 13th dies. Arsinoe is captured and sent up into exile in Ephesus in modern Turkey. One of the things we owe to Cleopatra is her scholars at the famous museum, the Alexandrian Library. One of them was Sosigenes. He helped Julius Caesar as he's reforming the calendar. And what do? They take the obsolete, out-of-date lunar calendar that had the seasons going per flui and replaced it with the modern calendar we're living in today. We are here on April 3rd, 2025, thanks to the Julian calendar, 365 days a year, a leap year every fourth year, modified slightly into the Gregorian calendar to account for a couple of other anomalies later. Took a romantic cruise down the Nile together. She was probably already pregnant. And this is always sounds like a nice vacation. No, 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 no. This was politics. This was a 400 boat flotilla, lots of troops going up the Nile, stopping at every city and showing people, I'm here with my boyfriend, the most powerful man in the world, Julius Caesar. I'm your ruler, right? All the way down to, that's a picture of my favorite place at the lower right, Philae in Egypt. It is near Aswan near the southern border of Egypt. It is it's on an island, gorgeous temples. Caesar later on puts a gilded statue of Cleopatra in the Temple of Venus because Cleopatra always insisted she was Isis, which the Romans equated to Venus, the goddess Isis. And that gilded statue stayed there for hundreds of years. It was seen later on by later writers. This excavation was found in Pompeii in the 2000 era, on a mural on a wall, which is presumed to be a picture of that statue at the entrance to the temple. The Ides of March happened. Cleopatra is in Rome, as it showed in the movie. She is there to show Caesar his 4-year-old son for the first time, and also to do a lot of politicking. Egypt only exists as a partner of Rome. Caesar's killed. Sad. Unlike the movies, she stays for days afterwards, a week, 10 days, something like that. Wants to get her son recognized as Caesar's heir. That doesn't happen. They're too busy. The Republic is in chaos. A new civil war is about to start, and They're busy chasing each other, so she eventually heads back to Egypt. We skipped ahead a few years. The assassins of Caesar have been chased down, killed. Big battle at Philippi. Mark Antony's the hero of the battle. A young stripling who was actually named in Caesar's will Octavian. At the age of 19, he's adopted as Julius Caesar posthumously as his son. So he takes over his name. We like to call him Octavian. Cleopatra probably did as an insult. His real name legally was now Julius Caesar. What did that do? That gave him a fortune. That gave him a lot of people, a lot of publicity, a lot of name recognition. And oh, by the way, the soldiers would just flock to him. Octavian and Antony, I'll refer to him as Octavian, just for continuity's sake. And Antony split up the empire. It's actually split three ways. And the second triumvirate, Lepidus soon is axed out of position. And Mark Antony and Octavian have divided the empire. Antony takes the east, and he eventually summons Cleopatra. He needs money for his ongoing wars. And it's a famous scene in Plutarch, it's a famous scene in other historians, and it's a very famous scene in the movies when she comes in to greet him in Tarsus, which is in southeastern Turkey, in a boat with purple sails. Purple was very expensive cloth in those days, from the murex snail. It took thousands of snails to provide the dye to dye one piece of clothing. Very expensive. The oars were tipped with, the blades were all silver, the oars of her galley. And she had her maids all dressed up as nymphs and were climbing the railings and the rigging and stuff. And it looked like Venus had come. Antony is sitting in the marketplace on a throne up on a platform with a crowd around him waiting for Cleopatra to come. The crowd starts filtering away, and then everybody's gone except him. They've all gone down to see Cleopatra and her wonderful boat. And finally he goes. And her attitude is, no, 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 this is Egypt, you come here. So he goes down to the ship. As it says, the barge, we don't know what it looked like, probably something like the lower left. The upper left, that's too big probably. The upper right, well, that's the gross image in Caesar's Palace in Las Vegas, of course. I'll just let you kind of scan the words. Can't see it from there. Okay, sorry. I'll hit the highlights. Marketplace was empty. Antony at last left alone, sitting upon the tribunal. While the word went through all the multitude that Venus was come to feast with Bacchus for the common good of Asia. On her arrival, Antony sent to invite her to supper. She thought it'd be fitter for he should come to her. So willing to show his good humor and courtesy, he complied. I mentioned she's the richest woman in the world, right? Okay. And went. He found the preparation to receive him magnificent beyond expression. Nothing so admirable as the great number of lights. For on a sudden there was let down altogether so great a number of branches with lights in them, so ingeniously disposed, in some in squares, some in circles, that the whole thing was a spectacle that has seldom been equal for beauty. Remember, this is in the pre-electric era. Well, describing the boat up front, she came sailing up the river Cydnus in a barge with gilded stern, outspread sails of purple, oars of silver beat time to the music of flutes and fifes and harps. She herself lay all along under a canopy of gold cloth, dressed as Venus in a picture, and beautiful young boys like painted cupids stood on each side of her. Her maids were dressed like sea nymphs and graces, some steering the rudders, some working the ropes. The perfumes diffused themselves from the vessel to the shore. It was just an amazing scene. She did things with grandeur. Cleopatra lived large. So Antony later on winters in Alexandria, and they start up an affair. Eventually, they get married under Egyptian law, which of course Cleopatra would have insisted on. Oh, by the way, it was illegal for Romans to marry, or noble Romans to marry non-Romans. So it didn't count. How did they live while they were there? Wonderfully. It was a party all the time. They had the groups there of Antony's Romans, all the higher up people in Alexandria, the people in the palace, the wealthy in town. They formed what was called the inimitable livers, the unending livers, as in the people who live.
Oh.
Extravagant dinners. At one point, Plutarch's grandfather worked in the palace here, and he walked into the kitchen and saw 12 boars roasting. And he said, "My, what a big group you're having." He said, "No, it's actually a very small group." What? "Yeah, we have to keep them all cooking and started at different times because we don't know when they're going to call for dinner. So one has to be ready." She diced with Antony. She drank with him. She watched him practice on the military grounds. He would go and listen to lectures out the library from the philosophers and the scholars. It's assumed he didn't understand what was being said. As I said, he was not known for his brilliance, and it shows later. They would go out dressed as commoners and get into bar fights. Everybody knew who they were, so you weren't going to cause a lot of damage. But if they wanted to throw punches, you would throw them too, right? Plancus, one of Antony's generals, actually did what was called the fish dance. What is the fish dance? Well, you strip down naked, paint yourself blue, attach a tail to your rear end, reeds to your head, and you somehow quiver a lot while you're dancing. Plancus later on was the founder of Basel, Switzerland. Franking Antony. Okay, what happened there? Antony would go out fishing. Well, one time he wasn't catching anything, and he saw Cleopatra come up. He wasn't going to pretend he wasn't catching anything, so he had one of his slaves go down and attach a fish to the hook. Cleopatra saw that happen. The next day he went out fishing. She had her slave go down and attach a fish to the hook, a salted fish from the Black Sea. He laughed. They appreciated each other's sense of humor. You may recall that the main library in Alexandria, one of the great repositories in human history of knowledge, burned down during the Alexandrian War with Caesar and the Egyptians. And a lot of the books were lost, if not all of them. It's a good debate over how many were lost, 10%, all of them, somewhere in between. Well, Antony, being the ruler of the eastern half of the Roman Empire at the time, the Eastern Mediterranean, directed that the Pergamon, a city in modern Turkey, which was also competing with Alexandria to be a center of learning, had a great library. He ordered them to send down 200,000 books and made that his gift to Cleopatra. Most expensive dinner ever. Cost over $10 million, maybe more. What was that? They went to dinner and had a bet. Let's see who can have the most expensive dinner. And Antony laid out a huge repast. Cleopatra said, "I can beat that." And she took off one of her humongous pearls and dissolved it in vinegar in her wine and drank it. Pearls don't normally dissolve in wine, and you find that in a lot of books. It couldn't happen. More recent studies have said, yeah, but if you boil the wine beforehand, it takes on a chemical property where it becomes acidic, and it will, within 5 to 10 minutes, dissolve a pearl. So she did drink a pearl. and it was very expensive. She went to dissolve the second one, and one of Anthony Jones said, no, 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 come on, you won. And one of his favors was he got rid of Arsinoe. What do you want, dear? Honey, sweetheart, what can I give you? Kill my sister, please. And he did. He had Arsinoe executed. And again, is it evil Arsinoe? This is the woman that killed her general so she could take command at 14 to fight against Cleopatra and Caesar. So again, not a lot of good people here. There was a recent find, well, recent, 1929, 1930s, where they found bones in Ephesus, in right off that main square, in a building called the Octagon. And they thought for a long time it was Arsinoe. And just in March of this year, they had lost the skull, found it again, and took it to, it lost the skull back in like the 1930s. They had the dimensions. That's why they thought it was a younger woman, a teenage woman. And instead, they were able to extract DNA from it and found out, this is recent, this year, they found out, sorry, it's an 11 to 14-year-old boy with developmental difficulties.
Oh.
So, two big campaigns in Parthia and Armenia that Mark Antony launched on when he was ruler of the eastern half of the Roman Empire. The first one, he tried to get into Parthia, and first thing he wanted to do was besiege one of their treasure cities. And he launched out with a huge army, and right around here was trying to get to a city, and he wanted to besiege it and take it and capture the treasure. But the siege train, catapults, towers on wheels, big battering rams, were slow. So he let them come up behind. And of course, the Parthians, not being as dumb as he was, when it attacked it, destroyed the siege train. So he is besieging it with just, trying to starve them out. That didn't work. He eventually has to retreat. He loses about 20,000 men. Okay, starved, frozen, etc. Climbed back over the mountains of Armenia. His Armenian allies, who provided a bunch of cavalry, had defected, but he did get through Armenia, got to the coast, and Cleopatra brought him money, food, clothing, etc. for his army. That was the first time she bailed him out. 2 years later, in 34 BC, he then attacks Armenia for deserting him, captures the king, goes back, and holds a big. And now we have the big triumph, the big parade, like the movie Cleopatra. That didn't happen in Rome. It happened in Alexandria. It was a 4-day spectacle. First day, bawdy comedies. Second day, the big military parade. Third day was down in the harbor, and animals, giraffes, elephants, lions, tigers. And and probably bears. And they paraded to the gymnasium where they did the famous donations of Alexandria. And what was that? This gets Antony into trouble with Octavian, who's over in the West and just looking for a chance to topple him. The donations were, I'm going to give your children chunks of the earth to rule. Remember the three children, there's Alexander Helios, Ptolemy Philadelphus, Cleopatra the seventh herself, and her son would rule together in Egypt, and Cleopatra Selene, the daughter, would get Crete and Cyrenaica, which are actually, Cyrenaica is a pretty wealthy area. And at that time, how does he get in trouble? Well, of course, propaganda. Octavian then turns to him and turns to the Senate and says he's giving away the Roman Empire, giving away 1/3 of the empire that we fought for, that you played treasure and blood for. There were other things that they disagreed on. There were a number of things, and they turned into quite a diplomatic shouting match, if you will. They patched it up. And how did they patch it up? With one of the good people in this story, Octavian. Octavian's sister. Paragon of Roman virtue. beautiful, sedate, quiet, and she's a recent widow, so he marries her off to Mark Antony to form the alliance. Antony goes and lives with her in Athens, and they father for about 4 years, and they have two children. Antonia, they're named after the father. Antonia Major and Minor, not terribly inventive here. And eventually, now the movies all have Cleopatra, like Liz Taylor, screaming and shouting, and she's been betrayed. What's he doing marrying this Roman woman? But you'll find in some of the books, probably not modern, she was a ruler. She understood marriages for political purposes. She'd been married to her two brothers, Ptolemy the 13th, and when he died, she married Ptolemy the 14th, and then he disappears from history. I wonder what happened. Um, the so she understood. Probably didn't throw a big fit. Eventually, though, he wants to get back to Alexandria, the pleasures of Alexandria, and the pleasures of Cleopatra. So he goes back, and eventually, you've insulted my sister, you've divorced her, and now you're going to have to pay. And oh, by the way, you're giving away the empire, and there were a lot of other reasons. And so Octavian declares war, not on Mark Antony, on Cleopatra. It's a foreign war. He knows Antony will come along with it. Antony gets a big fleet, 230 warships versus Octavian's 400. However, he had actually more at the start of the campaign. We'll talk about that. I don't want to get into tremendous details on the military aspects here, but his ships were much bigger, more powerful, and he had more of them, probably around 300 at the time, and could have taken on the larger fleet of smaller ships of Octavian. And he had about 100,000 soldiers. However, Cleopatra also went with him and was commanding a big chunk of the fleet because they were Egyptian ships. So she was at the councils of war, which upset a lot of the Roman generals. What are you doing with a woman here? And oh, by the way, she doesn't know anything. It's not helping. Meanwhile, Octavian has a general named Agrippa who hasn't gotten, I just read a biography of him recently. He doesn't get as much good publicity as he deserves. One of the most brilliant generals and architects of all time. If you're familiar with the Pantheon in Rome, that was him. Some of the aqueducts in Rome, that was him. A lot of the open spaces. I mean, he did wonderful stuff, but he also was a brilliant general. He had been Octavian's high school buddy. They were 19-year-olds together when Caesar died. And now they're about 35, and he's now a brilliant and experienced general, and they outmaneuver Antony and Cleopatra entirely. They cut the supply lines, they take their bases in Greece away. Antony's army and fleet and Cleopatra's are here in a camp. And unlike the movies where they say, let's fight on land, we can always win on land. They had deserts. They were in a marsh. People were getting sick. They were starving because they'd been cut off from supplies. The water was bad here. They were thirsty. It was just a horrible situation. People were deserting in droves. Whole regiments of foreign cavalry allies were going over to the other side. Generals were going over to the other side. So they were in danger of being wiped out. So they come up with a plan to break out. They put all of the treasure on Cleopatra's ships, and she is in reserve here. And then there are three sections of the fleet. They're trying to break out through the middle because this is Octavian's fleet, Agrippa's fleet surrounding him. The wind comes up, the lines break up, and an opening shows up, and Cleopatra, she's on with the treasure and her ships. Had they turned around, maybe, and it's purely speculative, maybe they could have turned around and taken the other ships in the rear and helped win the battle. Don't know. That's speculation. They got away. They fulfilled the plan. It was obviously an escape because normally ancient ships had sails and oars, ancient warships, but when the battle was due, they would leave the sails ashore because they'd just get in the way and catch fire. So they would leave them ashore. Antony's fleet took the sails with them. They were obviously going to flee. How long did the battle last? Depending upon which historical record you read, an hour, all night. So nobody's exactly sure. A lot of propaganda afterwards. So nobody's exactly, modern historians are not exactly sure what happened in all the battle, except that Cleopatra got away. Antony got into a smaller boat and chased after her. My love, she's leaving. And eventually the remaining ships either are wiped out or surrender. So what happens? The army, Antony's army, tries to march away. They get surrounded and give up. So now Octavian has two armies. He's got Antony's old army, which was humongous, and his own. And oh, by the way, he doesn't have enough money to pay them. And he's got all the ships, except for Cleopatra's squadron. So what are they doing? Well, they go back to Alexandria and they garland the ships with flowers and pretend it's a great victory. Well, we won, because nobody has heard otherwise yet, right? And the first thing they do is any potential opposition, troublemakers, etc., that are in Alexandria, they kill. The massacre of the innocents. So this is one of my favorite pictures, Alma Tadema. There's galleys in the background from the period. Cleopatra getting away in her barge. A sheepish Mark Antony. Okay, I caught you, honey, but we've lost. We lost everything. They go back to Alexandria and they realize, yeah, they got all the money, but all the soldiers are gone. They can't raise a new army. Who's going to train them? There's not enough troops left. They realize the end is near. It's going to take a while for Octavian to get to Egypt, so they don't do anything immediately. They just realize it's time to get ready to die. And they form partners in death from the inimical livers. They're now partners in death, and everybody is sort of having a big wake. Actually, Antony goes out to a little shelter on a little island in the harbor and stays there in isolation, morose for weeks. And finally, she coaxes him back into the palace to participate in these parties. They know the end is coming. Octavian is approaching. Cleopatra starts considering poison. Again, not the best person in the world. She tests it out on convicted convicts. Condemned convicts, I should say. So they're going to die anyway. So why not practice the poison on them? See which is best. She decides that they all look too painful. And reputedly, she decides the bite of an asp, which just puts you to sleep, would work better for her. Again, there's disagreements on whether she died of poison or snake bite. I like the snake bite story myself. Why? Because when Octavian did his triumph afterwards, he had an effigy of Cleopatra. He was there. He was there when she committed suicide, and which was after Mark Antony had committed suicide. She tried to talk Octavian into letting her continue to rule in Egypt as a client. No, I need Egypt. How about letting my son rule as a client kingdom? No, not either. I'm taking the whole thing. And so that's when she commits suicide. When she does a triumph back in Rome, oh, by the way, he marches her children, her surviving children. I'll talk about that in a minute. Her surviving children in golden chains in front of his chariot. 7-year-old Ptolemy Helios it was Alexander Helios and Ptolemy Caesar. Ptolemy Caesar, 7 years old, doesn't know what the heck's going on. He's marching in chains. The people of Rome were outraged that children were being marched in a triumph. And so they were allowed to live for a while. And anyway, Cleopatra in the triumph, her effigy had a snake attached to it. So he was there. He was convinced it was um, a snake. Anthony, as I said, committed suicide beforehand. Why? He was told Cleopatra was already dead. So he committed suicide. And then the slave who brought him the word said, well, actually, I lied. She's alive. Has Mark Antony brought up to her, and he dies in her arms. Why did I say 10 or 12 August? There's contradictory sources. Aspide or poison. Caesarion is escaping to India, actually gets down to the coast of the Red Sea. His tutor Rhodon says, hey, come on. He's your cousin. He's not going to kill you. Come on. He'll let you rule. He talks Caesarion into going back to Octavian, and he's immediately executed. Why? Octavian's friend, the philosopher Arius, said, too many Caesars is not a good thing. Antyllus, Mark Antony's son, Cleopatra's stepson, by a previous wife, Fulvia, is betrayed by his tutor as well. He's beheaded in the Caesareum, which was considered one of the most beautiful. Pausanias, who wrote about all the scenes in Greece and the Mediterranean, said that it was the most beautiful temple in the world. Theodorus turns him in, Antyllus is beheaded, and he's wearing a precious stone around his neck and a necklace. Theodorus takes the stone, and when Octavian finds out, he has Theodorus crucified. Like I said, not a lot of people here. Okay. Caesarion is betrayed by his tutor, as we said. The children are walking in the chains before the chariot, and then Octavia takes them in and raises them. Again, she is one of the only sweethearts by modern standards, and she must have just had a heart growth. The two boys disappear, Alexander Helios and Ptolemy Caesar, just not recorded anymore. We don't know what happened to them. Were they murdered? It's possible. More likely, childhood disease was rampant and they could have died from anything running through the city. She was portrayed as a goddess in Egypt, as we said, leading up to Actium. There was a lot of propaganda. Cleopatra treated as a debauched Eastern seductress, lascivious drunk, the Egyptian whore. Notice the crocodile lamp there on the side. These have been found all across Italy, France, and Germany. Why? Propaganda, hand out little trinkets, right? Depicting Cleopatra in a sexual position on top of an alligator. Okay, that's how she's practicing bestiality. And what else? She's in the on top position, which in a patriarchal Roman society, not good. She's that evil. But her statues were allowed to remain. As I said, the golden statue in the Temple of Venus, one of her aides paid Octavian a 2,000 talent bribe. Leave her statues alone, and he did. Or could it have been because Octavian was a very religious person as well, suspicious, and portrayed her as a goddess? So you don't remove goddesses. This is a scene that's recently found in this century, Villa Giuseppe in Pompeii. That's thought to be Cleopatra and her son Caesarion behind them. Notice they're both wearing that diadem. The Caesarion I talked about, it's in Alexandria Harbor. Here's the harbor. This is the Caesarium here. Supposed to be the most beautiful temple in the ancient world. This is it depicted in a modern game. Left-hand side is the modern park in Alexandria. I stayed in a hotel right next to that park. It is a gorgeous area. The temple's all gone. Oh, but you've seen those two obelisks out front. Maybe. I've seen one of them. There's the Caesarion. They're Cleopatra's Needles. They've been removed from Alexandria in the 1800s and were brought. One is in London on the embankment right along the Thames. The other one is in New York in Central Park. Cleopatra's Gate survives in Tarsus, where she met Mark Antony. We think there may be a single writing of hers survived. A papyrus was found at the bottom, Ptolemaic papyrus. Make it so in Greek. Kathleen Martin, my edit didn't make it through. Martinez, not Matrinas, from the University of Santo Domingo, is spending, she thinks, 40 years to clear this temple at Taposiris Magna. That's out west, along the coast, but in the desert, west of Alexandria. It is, she thinks, where the tomb of Cleopatra and Mark Antony can be found. She thinks it will take her 40 years. I don't want her to take 40 years. Get the backhoe. She has found a corbelled tunnel, an entrance shaft 30 feet down, 30 meters down, excuse me, and then a tunnel that is sloped downwards. And that tunnel, she hasn't found the end of it yet because it's full of water further down. And so she has to dewater it, is the last I've seen. Cleopatra Selene survived. The Ptolemaic dynasty, as I said, she's over here. And she is married off to another child that was raised by Octavia. They were raised together, kind of like brother and sister, but there's no blood relation there. And she's married to Juba II, who becomes the king of Numidia and Mauritania, which is modern Algeria. And she goes off to be a queen. There's a good book about her called Cleopatra's Daughter. And they have a son who's King Ptolemy, interesting name, of Mauritania. And he lives until the era of Caligula, who was the third Roman emperor. This is her tomb in Caesarea. This is a treasure found at a little villa near Pompeii. What was found there? A huge gold hoard and a bunch of objects. And they think this is Cleopatra Selene. Why? It's got a bunch of Ptolemaic things on it. There's a lion. There's an elephant. There's a moon. Selene means moon. So they think that's Cleopatra Selene. It's in the Louvre now. This is a family tree of Cleopatra through Ptolemy, who, oh, by the way, was executed by the Emperor Caligula. Why? He went to visit his cousin. He went to Rome. Hey, Caligula, bud. And what did he do? He wore a purple cloak. Only the emperor wears purple. But maybe he also wanted Mauritania. And he had him executed and he was brought into the empire. So Mauritania lost its independence. But they had a daughter named Drusilla. And she gets married to a couple of people. First one dies, Felix, and then she marries Gaius Julius Simaeus, and goes off to Syria, where he was the king of Emesa, which is a city in Syria, and we lose track of the records. Why this period is not nearly as well attested, particularly not for the rulers of the Roman world and the Egyptian world. So we don't have any records of descent there, but the kings of Emesa continued under Drusilla, descended from Drusilla, presumably. Priests of Baal, they were priest kings. And later on, they claimed through these priests, there was a lady, Julia Domna, who had married Septimius Severus in the 200s. 193 to 211, he ruled Rome as the emperor. And they had two sons, Pricola and Geta. If anybody saw the movie Gladiator 2, they're the two emperors in it. They were beasts. Caracalla was a real, I could do a whole lecture on that. But Caracalla, not great, but supposedly they are potentially descended from Cleopatra, as were the rest of the family through Julia Domna's sister, who later on produced two emperors, Severus Alexander and Elagabalus. Severus Alexander was okay. Elagabalus, another Looney Tunes. And supposedly claiming descent from that line was a queen of Palmyra named Zenobia. And if you've heard of Zenobia, one of my favorites, she was a queen. Her husband Odenathus helped defend the Roman Empire when it was entering what's called the crisis of the third century, and it was falling apart. It literally split into three or four parts before a emperor put it back together. But along the way, Zenobia declared independence after her husband died. Okay, I'm the queen. I got it. I got all this. And she conquered Egypt and all of Turkey, this chunk of Turkey, Syria, Palestine, part of Arabia, and she claimed that was her kingdom. Well, the emperor didn't like that, and he went down, captured her, and brought her back in chains and let her live in retirement. Why is that important? We're the descendants of Cleopatra. We have no records, but that's my DNA map from my ancestry.com. I'm Italian American, and so I've got Italian in me, and I've also got a little bit of, that's like 2%, but some North African. So that could be a descendant. Somebody in this room could be a descendant. One of you may be carrying blood of Cleopatra today. We don't know. We're not rulers, obviously, or we wouldn't be here, but there are always people born without benefit of clergy, like they like to say, okay, minus the ceremony of the parents. But so one of us here could be carrying her blood today. Okay, it's been lost in history. The story goes on. In 2000, another 2,000 years, I think people will still be fascinated by Cleopatra. More movies will be made. As I said, there's two in the hopper. Books will be written, more books. There's not enough to read. I was reading a few weeks ago, I was reading a book about from the 1930s on her. If civilization collapses in a dystopian future, people will be sitting around the campfire and swapping stories about Cleopatra still. Questions? No, wait, thank you. This is a fantastic turnout. I'm impressed.
Well, what did you use for your resources? What, obviously, there weren't books written at the time. Were you finding documents, or were you getting, or
My resources, great question. My resources were mainly modern books. As I said, but I included going back to the ancient books. I did go into Julius Caesar, Plutarch, the Life of Antony, and the a little bit in Cassius Diodorus. I looked them up online. But then modern books. I've read about 5 books on her, and as I said, multiple novels. Margaret George has a sort of novelized history book that's supposed to be semi-accurate about Cleopatra. I read that. I read the Stacy Schiff book. I highly recommend that book. I know that the book club is into. And I read the Cleopatras by Llewellyn Jones that I referred to in the briefing.
one other question?
Yeah.
Have you come across anything that you consider to be DNA of Cleopatra?
No.
Like, there was, I realize you're talking about so nothing that you would connect to your burial plot and start to wonder if that might be the bones.
Great question. The question is whether we've got any DNA that could be connected to Cleopatra from any tomb or anything. The answer is no. We have no tombs that are connected to Cleopatra or any of her family. the Alexander the Great was buried in a wonderful, gorgeous tomb called the Soma in Alexandria at the crossroads of the main streets. Those have all been lost. I've been to the dig site. They're looking for it. Alexandria, the ancient street level is 30 feet below the modern street level. I almost got arrested for going down there. Luckily, my guide said, no, it's okay. It works here. But the she's digging in a park, which is probably the only place it's been built up, obviously, and so they can't dig in too many places. They and the Ptolemies were buried around Alexander, except we do know that Octavian did say he gave a fine royal funeral to Cleopatra and Mark Antony. Never said where, and we don't know where. So there's no genetic representation of any of the Ptolemies, including Cleopatra or Caesarion or any of that crap. Sorry.
After the battles with Octavian and Cleopatra,
Yeah.
from what I understand, that Octavian saw that Egypt was so strategic in regards to finances, in regards to food that was being brought to Rome, that was the only province. You think about it, that was the only province that was directly managed by the emperor. There were no government sent to that province. Only who the emperor trusted to be in it because he saw the power.
Very true. Good question. To follow on to what you were saying, yes, that's why he had to take Egypt. He needs the money. He could not afford to pay his current army. Egypt provided much more funding than, and it wasn't just the grain, although that was important. It was everything. Right after, I have a whole nother lecture on Roman Egypt, and that covers that in more detail. It was the treasury of the empire. Without Egypt, there'd have been no Roman Empire. So right after Augustus took it, it provided about on top of the immediate gold rush of taking all of the national treasury. Oh, by the way, all 1/3 of the nobles' riches. He took, what's your bank account? Give me 1/3, everybody. And so he took all that. Interest rates went down in Rome because money was flooding the city. The Egypt taxes provided 1/3 of the total Roman Empire's finances, and 100 years later it was up to 2/3 because they had improved trade with India and the East, silks, ebony, ivory, pearls, the incense from Arabia. It was just an absolute treasury. Yes, he did. There was actually a law that no senator could go to Egypt without the emperor's permission. And a senator, there was a governor, but it was a lower level person, a equite and not a senator. And oh, by the way, the first governor they left in charge, he ended up court-martialing and executing eventually. But yeah, it was a tremendously wealthy area. Rome, it was essential for Rome. Great comment.
So you're saying that Egypt supported Rome, Rome didn't support Egypt.
Correct.
Okay.
Oh, by the way, the main topic in my Roman Egypt brief is they were squeezing the blood out of Egypt. There was a rebellion. If you lived to the age of 60, you lived through a rebellion, no matter what period of Roman rule you were in. There was a major rebellion. They were constantly, people were running away, taxes were heavy, they were squeezing it like crazy. Question? Yes. Oh, that is a great question. The question was, do I think Cleopatra would be as famous as she was if she was in our time? Yes. Yes, I do think she would be. Look at the Queen of England. Okay, she's famous, or the Queen Elizabeth, who passed away not too long, a couple of years ago. She was famous, as I said. People died to get invitations when she visited America. Everybody in the world knew her. and her picture was everywhere, her statues were everywhere, and she didn't have it. She didn't have any of the political impact. She didn't have any army. She didn't have any fleets. Her husband wasn't the most powerful man in the world, like Julius Caesar or Mark Antony were. Uh, so if she came here and did anything like that as a ruler, yeah, absolutely. Now, if she just came in and walked in the door as you know, asking us to give her a job, it might be harder for her to reach that era of fame. But if she came in here as who she was, a ruler of the richest country on the planet and the richest woman in the planet and one of the smartest people alive, yeah, I think she would be that famous. Great question. Thank you.
Remember, May 3rd at the ACC Auditorium, Dr. William Taylor. Don't miss it. And thanks for coming.